I'm Ken Bamberger, a professor of law and technology at the University of California, Berkeley, and a member of the advisory board of the U.S.-Israel Tech Policy Institute. What an honor it is that our next keynote speaker has agreed to make the inaugural event of this institute a highlight of her path-breaking trip to this region. Vera Jourova, the European Commissioner for Justice, Consumers, and Gender Equality, is a leader on so many issues of such great importance. She is a staunch champion of the rule of law and of individual freedom and liberty. She uses the power of her office to fight discrimination, end gender-based violence, and promote gender equality. She presides over the tremendous effort to ensure swift adoption of the European General Data Protection Regulation and to protect consumer privacy and consumer security in an age of online and digital commerce. And she has distinguished herself as a global leader in efforts to tackle hate speech and anti-Semitism, especially online and on social networks. Given these issues of such importance to her and to so many in this room, it's a special pleasure to be able to hear from European Commissioner Vera Jourova this morning, so please do join me in extending her the warmest of welcomes.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a real pleasure for me to be here today in Tel Aviv University at Cyber conference and to have the opportunity to tell you something about what we do in European Union in this field. Mr. Professor, it was such a warm welcome that I am still shivering. You shouldn't have done it to me. When I was listening, you speaking Hebrew, I was happy I understood some of the words. The words were cyber, high-tech, and technology. And this is relaxing because we all understand these words without the need of any further interpretation. Not only that we know what the words are, but what's in it. And it gives us such a great opportunity to work together, because also this linguistic aspect shows that we deal with the same things and with the same problems, and we have the same opportunities in this global digital village. And indeed, digital technologies are bringing to our lives everywhere in the world good and bad things. And I sometimes say that this is bitter-sweet cocktail, and we drink this cocktail everywhere for the first time. I think it was Anthony Giddens who said that this is a fascinating era we live in because we are encountering the new things for the first time. But for the politicians, this is a real challenge, I can tell you. As a Justice Commissioner and Consumers Protection Commissioner, I've been approached many times by many people saying, stop the wrongdoing on internet. And I realized, well, do I have enough instruments in my hand to do it? I can tell you, in Europe, I do not have enough instruments. I can do two things. To make clear that what pays offline also must be applied online, and some interpretation is needed here to come with clarification. And the second thing, what I have to do is what I sometimes call to go and kiss the ring of the digital god, to go and make an agreement with the IT providers. Please be with us and do what's necessary to keep this piece of land developing in peace harvesting the opportunities from digital and minimizing or eliminating the risks which come through digital to our lives. And this is exactly what we do in the field of tackling or combating hate speech online. Exactly this I did. I came to agree with 4 IT companies, with Google, Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. We agreed last year on the code of conduct, which means that they take their social responsibility and they are taking down hate speech within 24 hours when they are notified or when they find out this hate speech themselves. They do this homework. They are themselves threatened about the rise of populism and extremism and about the fact that online is the highway to radicalization. And they do it also because they are threatened that if we do not do it, we will start legislating. And that's what I have in hands. So it works quite well up to now. We have monitored now through some second monitoring exercise, and we see that they take down 59% of the notified hate speeches. And of course, we do not want them to take down 100%. Why not? Well, because the basic thing is that we protect freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Not everything should be taken down. They have to consider what's prohibited by the EU and national laws, what's prohibited as the hate speech, which has the potential to incite hatred and violence. This is prohibited by the law in Europe, and this is what we want them to do. When we started this initiative, when I announced that to the public that we have this code of conduct ready to start as the immediate action, because if we start working on legislation, the impact would come in 5 years' time. The process is very lengthy. So when we announced this, I was called the censor of Europe. And the people were criticizing me for breaching the freedom of expression and freedom of speech. And the Americans could not understand, and many of them told me, well, we have, fortunately, our Article 1 in the Constitution, which brings unlimited freedom of speech. And I said, no, we only want to apply online what's applied offline. And if you wake up in the morning, go out of your house and see on your fence Hakenkreuz drawn by some new Nazis, you will call the police to liquidate it. You will do it. But online, this must be done as well, because the probability that millions of people will pass by your fence is very low. But the probability that it will be seen by millions online is very high. That's why we needed this quick action. There is not a secret thing that some member states in European Union want to go for legislation already now. It means to come with the regime for IT companies, that it will be an obligation to take down hate speech within some period of time, so they keep our 24 hours. But it must be done under sanction. The companies are in this proposed legislation called legally liable for what's written online. And also there are high obligations regarding transparency to explain what they do with notifications and so on. This is the law which has been proposed in Germany, and I understand the German Minister of Justice, Heiko Maas, who said we had to engage in solving this problem by legislation because the increase of radicalization and extremism was and is varying. It's higher probably than in other member states. So Germany will go its own way if the law passes through. There are some other member states who signalize we might follow Germany. And in spite, I want to keep the European Union regime consistent and equal everywhere. I cannot prevent the member states from doing it because they know why they are engaging with legislation. However, I declared clearly for the European Union that we will continue this voluntary action or monitoring of the voluntary action of the IT companies, and in case of need we will start preparing some regulation. But we are not there yet, and I made this very clear when I discussed it with the Ministers of Justice of all 28 member states of the EU. By the way, I believe in digital we will to some extent stay 28, because for the Brits it's absolutely essential to be closely connected what we do in the European Union. We are now working on the implementation of the general data protection reform, and the Brits are going along with us. They are implementing, because they will very probably keep the same rules as the European Union. And all the threats coming through digital for security, these are the threats which they have in UK as well as in the European Union. So in digital, I believe we will go hand in hand with the Brits. So I am always a little bit more optimistic than the reality shows later, but here I think I am quite realistic. On hate speech, I don't want to speak too long, but I think that I have exhausted what I wanted to share with you, with one exception. Why I don't want to regulate, prohibit, sanction in this field? Well, this code of conduct is this voluntary action based on the existing legislation is bringing one very positive thing, because it is requiring very strong cooperation and common understanding between the IT sector, the member states' representatives, and the civil society, because this is a common action. The civil society notifies hate speech. Some people in IT sector are working with the notifications. By the way, it's pretty dirty work. Just imagine, you sit 10 hours a day with your computer and all that hatred is coming to you. The people are already burnt out. Many people had to be replaced and sent to do something more positive, because I was confronted with this several hours. I had enough. So again, the cooperation, the IT companies, the member states and the civil society which notifies the hate speech to IT, they have to act, and then the law enforcement in the member states must come and to identify the perpetrator and to punish him. So this is such a consolidated work, and what's very valuable on this, that it is not only prohibited, this hate speech online. There is the spirit of something which is not acceptable, and this is the very wide consensus of people who have influence on how we live in Europe. So I always get excited when I explain that, because we need people to be engaged, and we need the widest possible society to say, no, this is not acceptable. And by the way, this year, over the Holocaust Remembrance Days in Brussels, I heard Rabbi Lau in Brussels, who said, acceptance of the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe in the 30s was co-perpetrator of what happened later. This silent acceptance, this is the strong agent of the hatred as well. So stop on hate speech, on data protection reform, I will come down. not too low, because general data protection reform in Europe is a big revolution. We have our rules still from 1995. So you must admit it's high time to come with innovation and to capture all those novelties coming through digital revolution. We do not want revolution in legislation, we want evolution, and we want the people to get used to it. And I tried hard to get into this reform one strong moment, that the people in Europe must be aware that there is no 100% proof or safe legislation which will protect their privacy, especially in digital. They must stay masters of their privacy. So we will come with a very strong massage, information massage towards the Europeans to understand that what happens to their privacy, it's first of all their task to be able to have it under control. I always say that the people must be the masters of their data, and the data subjects, how we call people in Europe. So again, data subjects must not become data objects in digital revolution. GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, will come into force on the 28th of May 2018. Businesses are pretty nervous about that. It was amazing to see so many big American businessmen nervous about EU legislation. I was in Washington, I was enjoying this moment very much. But anyway, for them it will be easier to comply with the legislation than for thousands of medium and small enterprises in Europe. So we will help the companies to get into the new regime of data protection, which is pretty strict. We want to set a high standard of protection of privacy for the whole world, and we start in Europe. This is a very ambitious plan. And this plan is also connected with what we do in international dimension. When we have such a rule that the protection of private data of Europeans must travel wherever the data go. And the data go mainly to United States. So that's why we went through very difficult negotiations with the United States to create a safe regime for the private data going to United States. I finalized the negotiations under Mr. Obama's administration, and now I am really curious whether Mr. Trump coming is a game changer or not. I hope not, because we want to continue this regime of protection of private data. By the way, we have such a regime with Israel. Thank you for your enlightenment, Mr. Professor, that it was first in Egypt. I have to come back to Privacy One law and to read it. Anyway, with Israel, we have the so-called adequacy decision. The European Union accepted the fact that here is the protection in place, and we will review this adequacy decision by 2020. And I hope that we will continue this regime as well. I know I speak a long time, don't I?
You're good.
Last point. Europe is facing extreme threats by terrorism, by extremism, by also radicalization of Europeans against whoever you can imagine. And in Europe, we have a very, very good thing, which is Schengen regime. There are no borders. And always good things are abused by bad people. So this free regime is used by the criminals, and they can travel. One morning in I think it was November 2014, two guys woke up in Brussels and they went to kill people in Paris, and they did it in three hours. So we have a problem there. And our law enforcement authorities, police, prosecutors, judges, they are trapped in national and state borders because there is the territoriality of their functioning. And now imagine that the prosecutor or policeman, I will use the word policeman, in state A, let's say Germany, desperately needs to get evidence, the evidence which is hidden somewhere in digital, which probably is in state B, for instance in Belgium. He has to go to the national authority, to Belgium authority, before he finds out whether it's Brussels, Valence, Flemish, or federal. It takes time. Now, you don't laugh. If I say this in Europe, they would laugh. And in Belgium, I would not say it at all, because there is a very complicated system. But once again, if such a German policeman desperately needs to get the evidence from the cloud about some suspects who might plan terrorist attack, he has to go through the state administration, the relevant body in state B, and then to get the endorsement to go to IT provider to ask for this evidence. It takes a long time, and the people are killed in the meantime. Or he can use another way, which is unofficial, to go to the IT provider directly, again to kiss the ring, and to ask, could you please give us the evidence about Mr. XY? He might be preparing terrorist attack. And the digital god says, no, you have to go through the official way. So this is now the situation in Europe. Simply, law enforcement authorities are not equipped with the absolute legal certainty that they can get the evidence from the cloud and from digital sphere in necessary time. So that's why by the end of this year, I want to submit to the Ministers of Justice the rules which will enable the law enforcement authorities to get the evidence. And there will be a horrible dilemma over the preparation present with us, because you know that doing such a thing, we are moving between two extremes. Either we will protect the privacy of people, and this is in Europe fundamental right, or we will protect security of people, which means to enable the state to access the private data. And I always explain it as a pendula when we are now in Europe somewhere in the middle. Because when we will have absolute protection of privacy, it will be chaos and anarchy. If we will have absolute protection of security, which means omnipotent state which can access to your private data whenever and whoever it is, it's totality and dictatorship. And the people are threatened in Europe. They are nervous, they fear, and they push us to go from the privacy angle towards security. And we have to be smart, because this must not be overdone. It must be proportionate. There is one rule in European Union that the access to private data from the side of police and prosecution must be only to the extent of necessity and proportionality. And we need to keep this. So I have now this dilemma on my table. I think it's a systemic error that it's one table, because to have both things, criminal justice and protection of data, it's a little bit schizophrenic situation. But I still believe that in Europe we will be able to find the right solution. And again, how I started, for any further work in this sphere, it's absolutely important that we share best practices, we get inspiration also from Israel. That's why it's so important that we are here today, and we can inform each other about the development and to use the best possible ways of tackling the serious problems of nowadays, and at the same time to keep digital free for technology, from development, for education, for peaceful communication, for helping people to have better lives, because I think this is our task. Thank you very much.